Ladies and gentlemen, I call to order the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust meeting of June 22nd. We have a quorum here, so we're ready to go ahead with the business at hand. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes of the May 25th meeting. These have been sent to you previously for your review. Are there any comments or additions, corrections to the minutes as were presented?
No, but so move.
Second.
Have a motion made and second. Please cast your votes. And the minutes are approved. Item 3 on our agenda is the ratification of the claims that the trust has paid. They've been submitted to you previously. All but one of them are from TIF 8, and the only outrider is from the general fund. Are there any questions or comments on the payments that we're asked to ratify today?
I move their approval.
Second.
I have a motion made and approved to ratify the payments. Please cast your votes, and the payments are ratified. Thank you very much. Item 4 are items for individual consideration, and the first item on our agenda is the adoption of the fiscal year 2010-2011 Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust budget. Are we going to have a presentation on that, Kathy?
We don't have a presentation, but I'll be glad to make a few comments about it. The budget covers 4 major operating units that are a part of the Trust's activities. It includes TIF districts number 2 and 3, which are the downtown TIF districts, TIF number 8, which is the Devon TIF district, the General Obligation Limited Tax Bond Program, and then general economic development activities. If you turn to the first page, there's a summary of the entire budget. You can see there's a fairly significant change between the current year's budget of $60.9 million to the coming year of $93.3 million, and that difference is due to the Devon TIF district and the additional funding that we anticipate that we'll spend under that program, and some additional general obligation limited tax bonds that we also have issued. There are also breakdowns for each of the different subunits in the budget that's been presented to you, and I'll be glad to try to answer any specific questions, and Brent's also here, and he can probably do a better job than I can.
Are there questions from the trustees regarding the budget? The chair would entertain a motion to adopt the budget.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion made and second. Please cast. Is there any further discussion or questions before we go further? Please cast your votes, and the budget is adopted. Okay. Item B is a professional services contract with the Oklahoma City Economic Development Foundation, LLC, Economic and Community Development Services for the fiscal year that's coming up right now. Kathy, would you like to say a word or two about this?
Yes. First of all, this is the first time that the Trust has, from the beginning of the fiscal year, approved the contract that we have with the Chamber of Commerce for general economic development services. In the past, you have had a contract for the Strategic Investment Program and the work that the Chamber does for the city under that program. Roy Williams is here this morning or this afternoon with a brief presentation about their contract, and I'd invite Roy to come up and make his presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy, and thank you, members of the Trust. As Kathy had pointed out, this is not necessarily a new work plan, but it is a transfer of where it is being managed out of. I do have PowerPoint presentation. That's the bad news. The good news is there's only 3 of them. So this will be very, very brief. And I believe you might have this information already in front of you or not. Okay. Then it's going to be in front of you in just a second. I'll wait for it to come down. I'm not going to read the background to you, but just a quick sort of overview that the Chamber and the city have had a relationship in doing this kind of work, economic development, for 17 years now. So this is something we've been doing for a long time, have a long track record. We actually leverage these marketing dollars very specifically and cooperate across a number of business lines. including like the Convention and Visitor Bureau, our economic development initiatives, and leveraging of private sector dollars. The other advantage to this is it tends to relieve the city staff for some work because we can work on projects well in advance of when there's a decision made, whether or not it's real and whether or not it's something that the city really needs to work on. So we can spend weeks, months, years in advance taking care of some of that information before the city staff has to get involved. We set metrics annually with the city staff, and we can and are updated based on how things change and what we mutually agree to focus on. This is an annual request. This request has been reduced by 12%. So it does also, though, have an increase in it for something we hadn't done before, a $25,000 component in it to market the strategic investment plan that Kathy alluded to. Program of work, you can see up there again, I'm not going to read it to you, includes the entire spectrum of what we get involved in. We position Oklahoma City as a place to do business through multiple outlets, through our website, direct mail, event sponsorship. We host strategic conferences. We host site visits of site location consultants and CEOs and CFOs. We visit clients at their corporate headquarters. We put together marketing materials, and on and on and on to try to get our foot in the door and to try to make these projects happen. We have 2 full-time staff that are dedicated only to existing business retention and growth. They provide technical assistance, access to resources. We collect data on what their issues are, compile that, try to take care of those needs. In addition, we are ramping up our focus on entrepreneurship. That is not something new, but the extent to which we're ramping it up is. We're in the last stage of updating our bio-strategic plan, as well as an analysis over what has happened in the 5 years since we did the initial one. This will be completed this summer, and we'll provide, or that document then will provide our roadmap for the future. Our economic research has also been ramped up significantly. We now have a full-time economist as well as a research assistant who continually keep our databases up to date, find new sources, and do specific customer research. Public relations, we continue to be very proactive in our PR efforts, making numerous pitches to national media. And if you will recall, this last year, we've had numerous positive accolades by national and even international publications. So we're getting some very good press. Another area is retail. We continue to market Oklahoma City to key, what we refer to as destination retailers, or either retailers new to our market, trying to find those niches that we do have and trying to increase retail sales in the city of Oklahoma City. We're now 3 years into our retail initiatives program, and finally we're getting some successes. The Whole Foods is an example of a project that has taken years and years. So we have a number of those in the pipeline, and hopefully they will continue to come to fruition. We also provide a lot of marketing and demographics and economics for retailers, for national retailers. And that also goes toward our ability to do image enhancement nationally. Our current strategy is going to focus on developing solutions to specific trade areas within the metro. Some of those currently lacking quality retail, such as the northeast part of town, as well as Crossroad Malls area, where some of those areas are struggling. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a new push for the strategic investment program that will be focused on targeted CEOs in our targeted industry areas and also site selectors. Last slide shows some of the advantages in contracting this out with an organization whose prime mission is economic development, which is what we are. We're able to leverage the private sector dollars against these public sector dollars. Provides a really good benefit to the city because 100% of these dollars are spent on programming, not salaries, not overhead, et cetera. We do that. So the leverage is somewhere between 1 to 2 to 1 to 3 that the city is getting out of this money in terms of other private sector funds dedicated to it. We've also focused, too, on trying to get other resources into the marketplace. We worked on several EDA grants. We've been able to get 2 of them now. With the help of a lot of our strategic partners, that's going to be a great advantage. And we also partner, as I had mentioned, in getting these grants with many other entities. We have partnership with the county, with OCAS, with I2E, with OK Bio, Department of Commerce, other chambers, training institutions, career techs, et cetera. So we do all we can to leverage these resources as best we can to really try to prove out much higher results than really anticipated in what you could do with just these resources by themselves. So with that, I'll conclude. Be happy to try to answer any questions if we can.
Roy, thank you. Are there questions from the staff or trustees? Larry?
Yeah, well, I'd just like to have you make clear for the folks. In some, excuse me, in some municipalities, the city itself takes on the responsibility for economic development with their own personnel. Is that correct?
Correct.
But what we have decided here in Oklahoma City is we get a better deal and a better performance by subcontracting with the chamber to do the economic development activity that sometimes are done within the city itself.
Correct.
Okay? And then from time to time, there are issues that come up, like last year, MAPS 3, and there was a considerable amount of chamber involvement in that, and I think the chamber spent some money, did it not, supporting the MAPS 3 initiative, but none of the money that came from the city was used for a campaign like that.
That's correct. Not a penny. No, this is not advocacy money. This is all.
So any advocacy that the Chamber of Commerce is doing, if any citizen out there sees any advocacy for any issue, they can be assured that that money did not come from the money that the city is supplying to you all to do economic development.
That's absolutely correct.
Thank you, sir.
I just wanted to point out one other thing, and hopefully this doesn't confuse what was just the point that was just made. The money that is provided to the trust to fund the majority of this contract is a transfer from the city's general fund, which is one of the reasons why we asked the chamber to look at taking a 12% reduction in the amount of their contract for this coming year, because that was the amount that other city departments were asked to take. So the trust receives a transfer from the city's general fund to fund the $790,000 economic development services contract. The SIP program is funded through the Gold Bond program proceeds.
Any additional questions or comments?
Just a quick one from the standpoint of building, I guess on what both Larry and Kathy were saying, that at times like now, and I appreciate the Chamber's partnership and understanding the need for the 12% reduction, but that also brings home the wisdom that folks had 17 years ago to think that the vagaries of how the city's budget aren't as effective when the Chamber's doing the economic development work, because it does have other resources that in the private sector and other partnerships to still have greater continuity in what a lot of cities experience, especially during budget cutting times. The only other comment is, although that we were late, I think, bringing up the idea of having an education/workforce component in this year's contract, I hope that'll be explored by and hopefully we'll have a better economy and be able to pay for it, but to be able to have some component that addresses that as part of the contract that we see a year from now.
Yeah, and currently we do a lot of advocacy in the area of education and workforce, so I'm sure we can find some common areas of interest.
Hey, Kathy, any further comments? Roy, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And I guess it's up to us now to approve the contract.
Move approval.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? We have a motion made and seconded to approve the contract. If not, please cast your votes. And the contract is approved. Thank you very much. The next is a series of projects that are funded by TIF that have to deal with the downtown redevelopment and the 180 project and the Myriad Gardens project. We'll take them in order. Item C is an amendment number 1 to the contract for architectural services, project MP 0400, the Myriad Botanical Gardens, an increase of $66,095. Are there questions? We have an expert here from the Public Works Department, and Kathy O'Connor, who's been involved in all these. If we have questions, we can get those resolved quickly. Kathy, would you like to say a word or two about this in general?
Yeah, this first item C is an amendment to the contract that we have with FSB for architectural services for the buildings that are to be constructed in the Myriad Gardens. And the amendment is to provide funding for a retail market analysis, retail and restaurant market analysis for the facilities that are going to be constructed in the gardens, to make sure that we have the right types of facilities, that we understand the market that we're serving, and they're going to be doing some financial feasibility analysis work on those structures, and to provide some services to look at the geothermal systems that we're going to be using in the restaurant and cafe for heating and cooling those facilities. So that's what those changes are.
Any comments or questions?
Kathy had just raised a question to me. Has a decision been made as to whether these facilities will be leased to private enterprises or whether they'll be owned and operated by the city?
They will be owned by the city, and I anticipate that they will be leased to private operators to run the restaurant. You know, one of the things that we were looking at is it a single operator for the restaurant and the cafe together? How does the role of concessions and catering work into all of that? You know, the financial viability of those amenities to the Myriad Gardens. So that they're looking at all of those different things. They're also looking at the gift shop.
So understanding that what we're building there will have some market appeal.
Right. And hoping to understand the financial viability of them and how to structure them so that they don't need a subsidy, for example.
Very good. Thank you.
I appreciate the feasibility study because, as I understand it, the cafe was going to be hard to service product out of there without any back-end support services. So feasibility is the best pathway to go.
And Kathy, who will make the final decision as to selection of vendors and that sort of thing?
I imagine that the City Council will, and they'll decide the process that we'll go through. You know, there is some involvement of the Myriad Gardens Foundation with the Myriad Gardens, so it will be something that we look at through the City Council and the Myriad Gardens Foundation.
Are there any other questions or comments? The Chair would entertain a motion to approve the amendment.
So moved.
Second. Please cast your votes, and the amendment is approved. Item D is an item that we're asking to waive the consultant procedures and approve a contract for engineering services with Lemke Land Surveying, Inc., and this is a project that also deals with the redevelopment downtown, funded by TIF.
Lemke did the initial survey work that was required in order to draw up the construction plans and specifications for Project 180. What this contract will do is allow us to keep them on board to provide the surveying services that will be necessary during the construction of all the different streetscapes. So we really think it's important. We're getting a good value because they've already done so much of the work downtown in the initial survey.
Are there any questions or comments? Chair would entertain a motion to approve this item. Okay, motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Please cast your votes, and the item is approved. Item E is an amendment number 1 to contract for landscape architectural services with Howard Fairbairn Site Designs, Inc., landscape architecture for downtown streetscapes, multiple locations, for an increase of $162,500. Again, this is a 180 project funded by TIF. Kathy, would you like to say a word about this one?
And this is just some additional scope of work for the consultant working on the streetscape, on the landscape architecture components of the streetscape project, so that we make sure we consistently treat electrical, plumbing, mechanical issues that might arise that are, related to lighting or irrigation systems or all the different kinds of things that are going to be constructed. So again, it's just realizing that some of the scope of work was a little bit more broad for the entire project and the entire length of time that these projects are going to take.
Any questions on this particular item? Chair would entertain a motion to approve the item.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. All those, now, is there any further questions? Pardon me? No, I can make seconds. It's okay. It's a small honor at best. Please cast your votes, and the item is approved. It's important, but it's a small honor. Item number F, amendment number 2 to a contract for landscape architectural services, again having to do with the Myriad Botanical Gardens, increase of $50,000.
Again, this is a change that is something that came up during the work that we've been doing to renovate the Myriad Gardens, and realizing that we may need to look at the model that's used to operate the gardens right now. A city department, the Parks Department, maintains the Myriad Gardens right now. The Myriad Gardens Foundation also has a role. So this contract allows us to retain a consultant to look at the maintenance and operations model for the gardens, and to also evaluate what the maintenance and operating expenses will be in the future, and how we might structure things differently or look at things differently in the future to reduce the city's subsidy of the maintenance and operations of the gardens.
Are there any questions? Yes, Larry.
Yeah, I got an Accounting 101 question, Kathy. On this particular item here, the funding for this clearly indicates TIF 8. Okay? On the ones that just went by, there was no mention of TIF 8. The chairman said this was TIF money. Are we not also having monies available from the sale of general obligation bonds that are funding some of these?
Yes, yes.
But if it doesn't say TIF 8, it's general obligation bond money.
Right, and actually some of these may have some general obligation bond funds. We're using the general obligation bond funds for the construction. For the professional services agreement, we're trying to use the TIF dollars. So it kind of depends on, is it a part of the construction project, or is it a part of the professional services agreement that are overarching over all of the Project 180 components? So that's kind of how we're programming the GO bond dollars.
And Kathy, the projects that we've approved this afternoon, previous to this one, were primary design services.
Right.
They were TIF funded. So all the projects we've approved so far have been funded by TIF.
Yes.
With the exception of the Chamber of Commerce.
Right.
Okay. The chair would entertain a motion to approve item F.
So moved.
Second. Is there any further discussion or questions? Please cast your votes, and the item is approved. Item G, final plans and specifications for a Myriad Garden project once more. With the renovation project, architectural structures. Kathy, comments again?
These are the final plans and specifications for the architectural structures, the restaurant, the cafe, the new south entry, the band shell, that are to be constructed in the Myriad Gardens. So this will, allow for bids to be received in a few weeks and get the project going further.
Any questions or comments?
Have we, just as informational item, have we seen anything on these proposed structures, or what they're going to look like and where they're going to be located exactly?
Yeah, we've done a couple of presentations to the trust in the past on what the structures will look like. We do have some preliminary, they've been designed. We have preliminary renderings. I'll be glad to get you those. There's some links to the city's website, I think, that we can send you, and you can look at all the different, what the designs of these buildings look like.
Are there any other questions or comments? For item G, the chair would entertain a motion for approval. We have a motion made and seconded. Is there any further discussion or questions? Please cast your votes, and the item is approved. Our final project that deals with the Project 180 efforts is item H, and its final plans and specifications as well for a streetscape at West Reno Avenue from Dewey Avenue to Arcade Gaylord Boulevard, EK Boulevard, and North Robinson Avenue from West Reno to West Sheridan Avenue. Are there any questions or comments? Kathy, is there anything you'd like to say? This one's pretty straightforward.
Now, this is the final plans and specs to advertise for our first major streetscape project.
Any other comments or questions, please? Trustees, Chair would entertain a motion to approve item H.
So moved.
Second.
A motion made and second. Is there any further questions? Please cast your votes, and the item is approved. Okay, now for a change of pace, we have an entirely new subject to talk about, and that is our outlet mall project. Kathy, would you like to introduce the project? We have a contract amendment we need to talk about today.
Sure. On your agenda today is an amendment to the agreement that the trust has with the Horizon Group. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation that we'd like to go through this morning that kind of walks through the history of the agreement with the city and the project. Just to remind you, we entered into an agreement to provide incentives for this development in 2008. And the incentives were structured in such a way that we would make certain public improvements that were necessary for the construction of the outlet mall. And then after the mall was completed, we would provide a regional marketing reimbursement incentive to the developer to reimburse them for a portion of their regional marketing expenses. The amendment that's before you today does not change anything about that regional marketing reimbursement incentive. So the majority of the changes are related to the incentives that are to be provided for the infrastructure improvements, for the public improvements, and some language changes that tighten up some of the expectations that the city has on the developer for when we will provide our incentives and improvements to the project and some other things like that. It also obviously changes the time frames that were in the original agreement. Both the developer had dates that they were to meet and the city had dates that it was required to meet. Because of the changes in the real estate market and in the economy, neither one of us proceeded with the project in 2008, so now we're ready to proceed. And I don't know if you've been watching the news or paying attention, they have started some of the dirt work at the project. So to get started, the location of the project is at Reno and Council, just off of I-40. It has excellent site visibility from the interstate, which is very critical to the success of the development. The details of the project are that it's the overall size of the center has changed to 320,000 square feet from 340,000 square feet. We don't really see this as a significant or material change in the size of the development. It does provide for an expansion area for about 75,000 square feet of out parcels. Again, the location is at I-40 and Council Road. And the traffic counts along I-40 at that location are about 112,000 cars a day, so very high visibility and traffic counts. We anticipate that they'll make about a $50 million investment and generate approximately $106 million in annual sales from the development. As I mentioned earlier, we approved agreements in May of 2008 that stated that the planned opening of the center was November of 2009, and because of the changes in the economy and changes in the retail sector, we've now need to come back and change the agreement to reflect the new dates and new requirements. To remind you that the facility, Brent changed the order of the slides from yesterday. The revised agreement, again, changes the facility size to 320,000 square feet. The regional marketing reimbursement that's at $5.5 million over a 10-year period does not change. And that $550,000 a year equals about 12.5% of the sales taxes that the city anticipates to receive from the development. The public improvements have increased from $2.4 million to about $3.9 million, and that number includes an additional $1 million to to construct the public road portion, the public street improvements that are drive number 2. In the new agreement, August 31st, 2010 is a key date because that is the date when the developer needs to provide the city with documentation or the trust with documentation on the closing of the land acquisition, an executed construction contract, and evidence of financing. And once they've done those things, then we will proceed with our public improvements. Okay. The next slide shows you where the public improvements are scheduled to take place. The red circles are the traffic control improvements. Now, again, these were included in the original agreement, and there's been just a slight change in the estimated construction costs for those traffic improvements. The green bar on the right side of the slide is a drainage improvement that goes under I-40. That was also included in the original agreement, and again, the estimated construction cost of that project has increased slightly so that we can bore under the interstate without having to close the interstate and do some other things that, even though they're less expensive construction-wise, they're much more of an inconvenience for the traveling public. And finally, the additional piece is drive number 2. Curtis, could you go back? That's outlined in yellow, and that is the public street portion of the drive 2 that has to be constructed around the development. And the agreement says that we will pay up to $1 million or less for that portion of the street. If it comes in less than $1 million, we don't pay $1 million. It's, for example, if the bids are $700,000, that's what our contribution will be. Okay, project details. There's about 10 acres of out parcels for restaurants, hotels, or other complementary uses to the outlet mall. The outlet mall has a bold architectural style that hopefully will provide an exciting and attractive destination. The racetrack layout allows consumers to pass by every store in a minimal amount of time, and that's just the design of the layout. Some of the key tenants that have been signed include Saks Fifth, Brooks Brothers, Coach, Tommy Hilfiger, Jones of New York, Under Armour, Nike, Gap, and I do believe that the mall is about 75% leased at this point in time. So they've been making very good progress on getting leases signed by all the new tenants. One of the things that I just kind of wanted to remind you of from the original presentation was some of the rationale and how this fits within the retail incentive policy that the Trust and the City Council have adopted. One of the components of our retail incentive policy allows for destination retail or regional retail developments. And so some of the ways that you quantify that are, what is the trade radius for the center? How many people will travel how far to get there and things like that? And so some of the demographics of this development include that there's 1.4 million people within a 45-minute drive of this center. Within a 90-mile radius, there's 2.2 million. 112,000 cars go by the development on I-40 every day. The closest competition is the outlet mall in Gainesville, Texas, which I'm not really sure is that great of competition, but it's 135 miles away in Gainesville. The other major outlet centers are located in the Dallas metropolitan area. And we are seeking retailers that aren't already located in Oklahoma City. For example, Brooks Brothers does not have a full-price retail presence in Oklahoma City right now. So we think it's really important to get them here in this center. And finally, the economic impact. The project will create about 700 construction jobs and about 1,000 retail jobs once it's completed. It's about a $50 million private investment, estimated annual sales of about $106 million, or $325 per square foot, and $4.1 million in annual sales tax revenues. So One of the objectives of our retail incentive policy is to provide incentives to developments that broaden the city's sales tax base and help strengthen our revenue position for the city's general fund and the other funds in the city that rely on sales tax revenues. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions. I do want to say that I think that some of the changes that we've made as far as the August 31st date and the requirements that we've put on the developer to have the financing, have the land acquisition contract in place, help to mitigate some of the risk that can be associated with these kinds of projects. And the other thing I can share with you, I think, safely, is that when we go to the International Council of Shopping Centers meeting in Las Vegas, especially the last year, outlet malls and outlet shopping is the one segment of the retail industry that seems to be doing very, very well right now. The rest of it is struggling, and just about everybody we talk to says this development is a home run for you all, and it makes absolute sense. So, I really think that we've tried to mitigate the risk as much as we can, and yet provide a development that provides high-quality retail and generates sales tax revenues for the city. So.
Are there any questions from the trustees?
Kathy, just since it's hard for me to remember what I had for lunch, much less something in 2008, a couple of reminders. See if I'm right. The 12.5% of sales taxes will be only if they're collected from that facility, right?
Yes, it's 12.5% of what's generated by the center.
So the theme that we usually have in our incentive is that it's pay after performance would hold true in that case too.
Yes.
Okay. The other part that I was thinking about was how, given that hopefully our economy is recovering and the national economy will follow, just another reiteration that I think we've been fair to Horizon during this time frame of economic uncertainty, but I certainly hope that we'll stick to our drop-dead date, because I think if there are other developers that would be interested, would be doing a disservice to the city if we were to delay further.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? Kathy, what happens August 31st if one of these provisions is not complied with?
The trust can send a letter saying that we would like to get out of the contract.
So we have the option to cancel the contract if for failure of performance as
Correct.
of October 31st. Okay. So that's safeguards that's built in. And the
Right.
provisions.
You don't have to, but you can.
Right. So I want to make sure everybody understands, particularly our viewing audience, who don't have the benefit of the contract, that we have done everything we can in the drafting of that contract to protect the city's interests as we go forward.
I was visiting with Mr. Rumps earlier about their proposed capital structure, and I'm a little bit unclear. We're talking about a $50 million private investment. He and I discussed a $70 million investment. I'm kind of wondering what the difference might be between those two numbers.
Okay, we have a representative from Horizon here. Care to come to the podium?
Hi, my name is Tom Rumps, Senior Vice President for Horizon Group, and thank you for the time to address the trust this morning, or this afternoon. In terms of the investment of Horizon Group, our plan is that the $70 million would include, all the full land development. The $50 million was our minimum that we'd be investing, where $70 million is probably what it's going to be at the all-in total project cost.
Is that including the ancillary parcels that Kathy described in her presentation, or what is that?
The ancillary parcels would be sold to other retailers, or most likely restaurant operators, hotels, or other kind of businesses that you would typically see surrounding a shopping center. So that would be an additional development on top of what Horizon would put into the project.
I think the difference that we're looking at is when we calculate economic impact, we use the amount of the construction value of the property, and we use it was a minimum number that was very conservative. That's the number that was in the original agreement as kind of the minimum threshold. From what Tom is saying, they now have to spend about $70 million to build the full 320,000 square feet mall, the land acquisition costs, and all the other development costs that are associated with the project.
Some of the tenants that we're bringing to the shopping center that are different from 2008 have a lot higher cost of improvements to them. They have a higher tenant allowance. Some of the names that, the Saks off Fifth, the Coach, they generate a lot more sales, so it's a win-win situation for the city in terms of sales generation, but it does cost more to bring them to the property.
So there's $20 million in land costs, professional fees, site prep. I mean, I'm still not clear on what the difference is we're talking about.
Between the
$50 million and the $70 million.
$50 million was the minimum investment that the city had required Horizon Group to put into the project to comply with the economic development agreement. And frankly, the full cost will probably be around between a little bit at the higher end of the $60 million, but it could be around $70 million by the time everything's built out.
And how will that be capitalized?
It'll be a source of equity as well as financing.
Would you mind being more specific about that? What kind of equity are you going to have in the deal? What kind of financing? Where will you who will provide financing for this kind of deal?
Yeah, we're working at the point that the financing is most likely going to be 70% of the project cost, so approximately $50 million. So the equity investment would be the residual $20 million in rough round numbers there.
Do you have any concerns about being able to line up your equity and debt in the next 60 days?
No, not at all. We were in New York last week finalizing term sheets with a couple of equity investors and lending institutions, and we have another group that we're working with that also has term sheets that's been provided to us, and it's a matter of selecting which one's going to work the best. I think that we'll definitely be able to close within 60 days.
Tom, are there any lessons learned or expectations need to be changed based on what your experience has been in your El Paso location? I know it's a different market, but anything there that transfers?
Well, I think in El Paso we've been pleasantly surprised. The expectation in terms of sales performance has exceeded what we even expected. It's a different market in the sense that we're literally advertising to a different country. So in terms of that component, Mexico was a lot different in terms of making ourselves acclimated to that. We have a lot more special events, marketing promotion activity that we had after the first 6 months, and we would do the same here. We had the American Idol people there. Hopefully it's okay to say the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders. Maybe we'll have the Sooner cheerleaders or Oklahoma State Cowboys. But with that kind of event, we also brought in the high school cheerleaders to make it more of a community event as well as a regional event. So I think the special events, promotional activities, the good thing in El Paso is it opened up strongly, and since that time we've been able to generate a lot. We've increased our tenants mix in that property too. There have been a couple smaller retailers like Corrette, Sag Harbor, not large names that got out of the industry. We've been able to replace them with Chico's and Kenneth Cole, which are some of the hotter names in the retail business. So the success will beget success. The 20,000 square feet that is not being built initially, we've gone from 340 to about 325,000 square feet. That's not lost space. That will be part of the next phase. And actually, we're hoping to be able to open that up at about the same time as the initial phase. But we see that also as being able to enhance the presentation, the shopper presentation, having better retailers just through the success of where we're at. And as Kathy was saying, the outlet industry is really the strongest retail segment in the market right now. Because of that, and there's so few deals and so few financing components out there right now, there's only been 1 or 2 opening per year. This will be one of the only probably 2 or 3 opening in 2011, so it's going to garner a lot of attention for the city, and you're going to have a great tenant mix here. So we're real excited. And back to 2008, we've been able to bring some a lot more tenants that, Saks is going to be here, which is 28,000 square feet, which is not part of the original plan. So we're real pleased with where we're at.
Thanks. Larry?
Mr. Chairman, as Tom knows, I appreciate your candor in the meeting we had before, where you were very open with some very difficult questions. The thing that came up in there, and Brent, you may want to speak, either you or Tom, we had a deal back 2 years ago that required X amount of incentives, and I have no intention on going back on that. And now you want an additional $1 million for a private road. But that money for that private road, correct me if I'm wrong, has nothing really to do with the need for that public road being built by the city. You have need for an additional $1 million in incentives in order to make your financing package somehow fit together.
Well, it really relates to what we feel is a win-win. We're bringing a lot better package to the property. A lot more sales will be increased from what we were planning in 2008 because of these new tenants. And, we've kept the quality of the shopping center. A lot of other developers would probably have said in 2008 to 2010, instead of building the back of the building and drive it to have a nice presentation, let's build it in a metal pre-engineered building. We want to make sure the shopping center has a top-notch presentation, something that not just us, but also the city will be proud of. It's the first thing that people will see when they come into your city from the western, going from west to east. So we don't want to cheapen this up. We want to make this something that we're all pleased with. And again, we feel like the revenue generation, and we're also putting in additional money in it versus where we were in 2008 too. So it wasn't like we asked for everything to be funded. So it's, again, we're trying for a win-win situation here. So.
And, Mr. Chairman, I would add that while you're talking about how strong the outlet mall market has been across the country, unfortunately, when you look at the Internet and you check out Horizon's net income over the last several years, they've shown a net operating loss each year, which doesn't match up in my mind with being this strong type of economic activity. So I have a number of serious concerns, and it all boils down, as Brent knows, on page 11 of 25 of your agreement, where it's talking about the what's going to happen in the future. I showed Brent a thing, make us whole. I don't think the upfronting of the $1 million for the road meets the same criteria that our clawback philosophy in the past has met with things like the advertising. And so I don't have a good feeling about it, and I'm going to have to respectfully vote no.
If I could make couple comments. The financial condition of our company, there is a non-cash item, depreciation. So if you take out the non-cash expense, our company will have a net cash flow, a positive cash flow. Typically, almost every real estate company you look at, because of the depreciation factors, the interest carry, and property will have a net loss. And then once you look at the way REITs are really treated, they add back all the non-cash items. So that's a pretty standard financial statement. And so that addresses that item. I think that's it. I'm trying to remember if you had another point that you raised.
One of the points that Larry made, I think, was the absence of a clawback provision in that particular contract.
Yes, I meant to address that. Thank you. As Kathy had mentioned, the Horizon had responsibilities in 2008 to deliver them all. The city also had some responsibilities. I worked very closely with Kathy and Brent on where we are at all the time. We weren't pulling the agreement out saying we're looking for a road to nowhere. We talk quite frequently. We're very open with where the status of the project is. And similarly, we're not going to be looking at if things, for some reason, another Lehman Brothers go out of business like they did in 2008, things go upside down, we're not going to say we still want a road to this property because we're not going to have a project. We're very confident of where we are. We're obviously starting site work. We're optimistic of the project, the market, and very excited to be here.
Kathy?
One thing I'll say about the road construction, though, is that in the agreement on page 11, it does say that we will not begin construction on that public road until we see progress on the construction of the mall. So it is delayed in the agreement until the mall construction has reached a stage that we think is showing good progress, but that we can still get the road built in time to meet all the other deadlines in the agreement. So there's a little bit of a balance that we'll have to reach with that.
At the end of the day, it will be a public road.
And yes, it will be a public road.
No. Yeah.
Tom, in your market analysis, what percentage of the customer base will be outside of Oklahoma City residents?
We're anticipating probably 30 to 40%. That's pretty typical for an outlet shopping center. And, based on the demographics, when you look at the trade rings between 45 and 90 miles, there's a lot of people in that area. The other key thing is outlet centers augment the tourism that comes to the market. We worked very closely with the Chamber. We spent a lot of time talking to them about the plans that we'll have in terms of marketing and trying to target similar kind of tourism components in the state fair and the softball tournaments and everything else that this marketplace has. So we'll probably have, if you look at the ICSC, International Council of Shopping Center and Value Retail News statistics, you're typically 30 to 40%. In El Paso, we're probably, I want to say we're 50 to 60% because of the large predominance of the border traffic, and then there's also Las Cruces to the north and obviously some of the local population.
David?
And this is probably a question best answered by Kathy or perhaps someone from the Chamber. I recall that part of, all the risk management we're thinking about as we go through this vote, part of that, too, if I recall originally, was based on the notion that not every prime location is within the city limits. In other words, that developers would have options to be outside of the city and that might lose those sales taxes. Is that kind of, I wouldn't say threat, but competition still there?
Definitely. I think if you just even think about some of the retail development that's happening in Moore, Norman, Yukon, Mustang, all of those cities, Moore may not, but the others still have sites that are certainly large enough for this type of development and would be more than happy to have it, I'm sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Are there any questions of Tom before we let him sit down? Tom, thank you very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Kathy, I assume if we go forward that we can get periodic reports to the trust about their progress and whatnot. So,
We certainly can.
good.
That's no problem.
Larry, do you have anything else you'd like to say? Are there any other comments or questions from the staff regarding this particular project? I guess it's staff's recommendation that we go forward with it as it's proposed. The chair would entertain a motion then to approve item L, which is a revised economic development agreement with Horizon.
So moved.
We have a motion made and second. Are there any further questions or items to be discussed? If not, please cast your votes. And the item is approved by a 4-to-1 vote. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda, item 5, is the general manager reports. Kathy, you, as our general manager, you can.
I don't think that there's anything that is of a significant difference since our last meeting. I will say that, we're going to continue to see a lot of contracts and amendments and addendums to the projects that are related to Project 180. And, it's a pretty exciting time. We're going to really start seeing some construction on those projects now. And obviously the Mary Gardens is well under construction, but that's going to be a major part of our activity over the next few months.
Kathy, to that point, and then thinking through of the Chairman's wanting an update as we go forward on the retail project, but maybe it'd be good for us to monthly to get kind of a where are we on a timeline basis on some of these. And I keep hearing that clock ticking on the Myriad Gardens, for example, and keep getting anxious even though it's still 10 months away. But those kinds of things, maybe if we could just periodically get a how are we and where are we on the status, just in a graphic format.
Now that we're beginning to award construction projects, contracts, we can actually report on construction progress where we couldn't before. It just seemed like a lot of, so.
But they promised us that it'll be finished in time for the Arts Festival next year. Substantially finished, I think, is the word. The Mary Gardens project is certainly one that we've watched with a great deal of interest. It's really an exciting project. Anybody who saw the picture in the paper last week of the tree there moving around realizes that it is an extensive, well-done project, well-thought-out project. Are there any comments, additional comments from the staff? Comments from the trustees? Are there any citizens who would like to make comment? Hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.